Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new session with Code with Sally. The session run every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Next week, I'll be away attending Vancouver True North Dreaming. So I won't be available to run the session. For anyone who's attending the session or watching the video for the first time, the session is running every Thursday at 12 Eastern Time, but the recording we usually upload it on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, you'll find Code with Sally channel. I have a playlist here for the beginner series. If you go through it and you click, you'll find that we have the oldest first, and then the newest one will be towards the end. So if you want to skip sessions, you can do. If you're interested in a specific topic, you can just watch the sessions related to that topic. And recently, because we moved from the beginner series to intermediate, so I started a new playlist for the intermediate session. So any previous session is available on YouTube, and the recording is available for you. And anytime, if you have questions between the sessions, you can send me on LinkedIn or Slack, and I will do my best either to answer you with a video if that's possible, or to answer you one-on-one or during the next session. So feel free to ask questions anytime you have one. And yeah, you can check the recording of any of the sessions on YouTube. It's free and available for everyone. So today, the plan was to explain Queueable Apex because we are in the series of Apex invocation, and specifically we were talking about asynchronous Apex. And we discussed last time, or the last two times, the future methods and how they work and how we can use them and how we can, like, what's the limitation, the syntax, and how to do unit testing for them as well. But to be honest, when I was preparing for the session, because I always say, like, I don't jump into the next topic before giving you the basics or the information you need. So I came up with another idea for today's session, and that will serve us for the next couple of sessions related to asynchronous Apex. And I thought, to follow the same pattern I had, like, I have to explain to you this first before jumping into Queueable Apex. So what we want to understand today is understanding implements in Apex, what it means, and why it's important to understand it. And we'll see as well what that means and its interfaces, what interface means, and how it can be used. The reason why we did that, and I'll show you, is that because we need it for Queueable, Batchable, and Schedulable. So those are the three types remaining for us for asynchronous Apex. So again, why the session? Last session, when we were working on the how to test asynchronous Apex and future methods, because we had API callout, we implemented something called country mock response. And we found in it that we did something called implements, and it was implementing HTTP callout mock. And at the session, like, I went through it quickly, what it means, but I feel most people, like, or I received questions, were wondering, like, what implements doing here, or because we created multiple classes before and we never had implements. So people are wondering what implements doing here, or what's the purpose. And I thought as well, like, in the next sessions for asynchronous, we'll see, for example, when we do Queueable, we'll see implements and it's implementing Queueable. When we move to the batch job, we'll see that it will have implement and it's implementing database.batchable. And lastly, when we will move to Schedulable and how to do schedule Apex or schedule an Apex to run on a specific time or like repeated, we'll see that it will implement something called Schedulable. So I thought, like, it's very good to take a pause and before finishing or talking about those asynchronous Apex concepts, it's a good timing to have a pause and to see what implements mean, because we didn't dig deeper in it when we used it last session. It's very good point, like, or stage where we should talk about interface. We had, for anyone who's attending the series just now, we had previously different videos and sessions talking about different object-oriented concepts. Interface is one of the object-oriented concepts, and at the time of those sessions, because we were in the beginner series, we said, like, we'll keep it for future. So it's the time to discuss one of the object-oriented concepts, which is the interface. And we will explore together what does it mean a class implementing an interface and what that will enforce, or what and how it can be used. So that's the target of the session. Again, feel free to ask any questions. It's important to understand it. It will make it more clear and more easy to understand the coming sections and sessions and how we implement the asynchronous Apex. Some people used to memorize. For Queueable, I have to have this method. For example, batch, I have to do this. I find it hard to memorize, and I don't encourage memorizing. If there is something we can understand, it's better to understand it. It will make it stick more and easier to know why we are doing. So let's start together and see the topic for today's session, and its preparation for the remaining of the asynchronous Apex. So the first question we want to discover together, like we saw in the sample for the mock response, let me show it to you. And you have access to this code on GitHub. Under each video, if there is a GitHub related to it, I usually add in the description on YouTube video what's the GitHub link for this video. So you will have access to this in the previous session GitHub. So we saw together, like, we had a class called country mock, and we saw implements HTTP callout mock. And that's something we want to understand why, or what it means, and what implements mean in Apex. So when a class implements, so that means here, this class has implements for HTTP callout. So when we have implements, that means the class is implementing an interface. In that case, the interface that this class is implementing is HTTP callout mock. What does that mean? It's promising, like, you'll find us, like, or even if you search online, interface, usually people say, like, it's like a contract that it's written in it what are the method or what I'm expecting from any class that is implementing this interface to have. So even if I go here, right click in Visual Studio Code and say, go to definition, I'll be able to see the interface that Salesforce is creating. Like HTTP callout mock, it's not a custom interface, it's a standard interface that Salesforce has implemented for us to use. So if you go there, you'll find that we have here the contract for this interface. So this interface, and we'll learn together the syntax and we'll create one together. But what it means you can have in an interface one method, or a contract saying that you have to implement one method. Another interface can have 3 methods. So regardless of the interface, but the interface meaning it's a contract. And when a class is implementing an interface, it's giving a promise that it will follow the contract restriction or the guidelines of this contract. So if a contract specifies that you need to have 3 methods, this class will implement the 3 methods as well. That what it means. Like if a class is implementing an interface, so it's following the contract instructions, which means it will create all the methods that this interface is forcing us to implement. So it must include all the methods defined in that interface. And that's why it's very nice to understand, because that will make it meaningful more to understand why, for example, when we had here country mockup response, why we created this method. Could I name it something else? Can I change the parameter type or add an extra parameter or change the response of this method? All those questions, the answer to it, no, you cannot change the method name. You cannot delete this method. You cannot change the parameter types because I'm following the contract that the interface HTTP callout mock is requesting me to follow. And it's not just in Visual Studio Code. We saw it last time. If you open here, say Apex, I'm searching with this interface name. So you'll find the documentation. So each standard interface or like Salesforce providing to us, you'll find it in the documentation. And I like always, for anyone who's new to the session, I always like to refer to Salesforce documentation because it's the latest and it's very good skill to learn how to read their documentation because you will find a lot of details and information that is useful for you while implementing, and you don't need to memorize all of them. So here, when we say HTTP callout mock methods, here it will list all the methods that you need to define in your classes that will implement this interface. So that's two ways to see the interface and what are the required methods. And when you hit like click on it, it will give you like the signature that you need. It needs to return HTTP response. It's expecting a HTTP request and the method name is response. So you'll find that this is what we did. For example, when we did the class callout response mock. So it's very important to know how to figure out how to see the details of any interface. Like for example, for Queueable, you can go online and say instead of HTTP callout mock, I say Queueable interface in Apex. That's an interface we'll be implementing when we will work on Queueable Apex. But just to give you an idea, so here give you what are the methods as well. Like here it's saying you can go to Queueable methods. It will tell you that you have only one method you have to implement in your class, and it's execute. So that's the general idea. What implements mean? So implement means that a class is implementing a certain interface. Interface is a contract that this class will be following. And when we say the class will be following the contract or will be implementing the interface, that means it has to implement all the methods defined in that interface or that contract. Again, we'll learn more about it. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. We'll be creating custom interface ourselves today, and we will see how it will behave. But that's the general idea, and that's why we want to learn it, because all the remaining Queueable batch jobs, Schedulable, all of those are implementing different interfaces. So it's a good idea to see them first or to understand what is an interface first before jumping into the implementation. Okay, so now we said what is an implement. We want to say what is an interface in Apex. So first we'll say, as we said, like it's a contract. So what means it's a contract? It's just the definition of methods. So it's the method names that a class must implement. So you'll notice here, when I open the HTTP callout mock interface that Salesforce created, it's not something that we created. It just lists that we have this method. But you know, when we create a method, we have usually a curly bracket, like what we have here. We usually have the logic, what this method should do. But in the interface, we don't do that. In the interface, it just states the method names that the class must implement. So the method names with what is the return type and what's the parameter the method would be expecting. That's all. It's only contain method signature, no body, no logic. As you saw here, we don't have any logic. The class that is implementing the interface and including this method is the one that has the logic. But the interface itself, we have zero logic. We don't have any instructions, what the logic or what statements we want to run. Classes use implements to promise that they will provide those methods. And that's what we did here with country mock response. When we did implement, we said, I promise that I will be implementing all the methods needed for this contract, which is the interface that is called HTTP mock. So that's why we created, for example, this method, and we followed the same response type and the same parameter type that it's expecting. Yes, Healthy.
So when you can recognize when you read the code, when it's an interface, there's no body, there's no bracket. Is how we can recognize when it's an interface.
And the other
because there's the word interface too.
Yes, you have a word interface, and we'll see it together when we implement our custom. I'm just giving you the highlight, like the bigger picture, like what is an interface, what's the benefit of implement, and then we'll see it in action. All of that, like what we are seeing here, is just standard interface that Salesforce created for us. It's not something we created, but this is not like the maximum we can do. We can still implement our custom interfaces, and in some scenarios, some project, bigger implementation, most probably, we tend to do sometimes interface if we want to have like dynamic behavior, or we have like we want to enforce that all the classes will follow certain pattern or certain methods needs to be there for all of them. So we'll see it more together. But yes, the interface, you recognize it because it has interface as a keyword here instead of class. And the methods signatures are just signatures. Like, what's the response? Is it void? Does it return a string? What's the method name? And what are the parameters that type for them? And that's it. It doesn't give you any logic inside. The classes that implement the interface, they promised, or they will be forced to follow the contract. So if you had in this interface 3 methods instead of 1, I wouldn't be able to save this class unless I include those 3 methods that the interface is expecting, and we'll try that together as well. So that's what is an interface and class implement. Interfaces help us create consistent and reusable designs, and we'll see it together shortly in the demo we have. So you can think about like a brief description. If someone asks you, like, do you know what's the difference between an interface and a class that is implementing an interface? You can think about an interface. That interface defines what should be done, like what we have to do. But the class is the one that defines how it will be done. Like the interface here define that we have to have a response, but that's it. It didn't say how it will be done. The implementation or how it will be done, it will be defined in the class implementing the interface. So that's the basic difference between them.
So when you say Salesforce did it, so it's because you asked the AI to do it?
No,
Like Agentforce or something?
it's part of their documentation. You'll find that there is something called Queueable interface. Like the HTTP callout mock response interface is available. Same healthy as when, for example, we said like integer class. When we said integer class, sorry, Apex, and we open the class here in integer class, it's a class that Salesforce defined for us, and it's available for us to be used. So the same, Salesforce has some interfaces implemented or created for us that we can reuse, the same as the classes that they have. It's not that I used AI, it's out of the box. Like it's coming with Salesforce, we didn't implement it ourselves. So that's standard, or it's developed by Salesforce, and that's it. We'll see together in the demo shortly how we can create our custom interface, and how we can implement it to see it in action together. So briefly, like when we will see in the demo together now, we have if you want to implement an interface, first you have to define the contract or the interface itself. And that will be by having, instead of public class, you will have public interface and you give it a name. And then you will define one or multiple methods, signature with like what's the return type and if it has any parameter or not, and semicolon, and you don't have any implementation. So that's whenever you want to define a custom interface, those are your steps. You have to define the contract or you have to define the interface first by doing this first step. Second step will be, okay, I have my contract and I need to start using it in a class. So you'll have a class, for example, here, public class dog, and then you will have implements and sound maker. It's implementing the interface I just created. And because it's implementing the class, the interface that I just created, so I have to implement all the methods listed in this interface. In my case, I have only one, so void, I cannot change it to be returning an integer if the signature is void, and then the same name. And then we started to have our implementation. So I'm saying here, again, the interface is saying what we should have. And the doc class is implementing the interface and it's saying what it will do. So it will be describing what the make sound is doing. So that's briefly the steps that we'll see together, how we can do it when we implement our example and demo. So I will start the demo, and at any time, if anyone has a question, please stop me and ask it, because I'm sure if you have the question, someone else as well has it too. So the first one, like I'm assuming that I assumed a scenario that we want to have export interface that, for example, I can export accounts, contacts. So I will have an interface called exportable. Let's say here I go to classes. You will create a class and you will say exportable. Here, when it will have public sharing class, we remove it and we replace it with interface. So that's the first step, Hildy. Like I'm saying, it's an interface. It's not a class. So I said it's interface and give it the name, curly brackets, and we have to start setting our methods. So it's an exportable like interface. So I will start by doing a method that will return a string. For example, I will pass the use case that I'm thinking to do is that I will have accounts, list of accounts, and I want to have a string representing those accounts with comma separation for their fields, so I can export it as CSV file. Or another one for contacts where I want to print or have first name, last name, and email, and I wanted to have it with another separator and return it as a string. So that's the use case that we are trying to do. So here I will do method, export, and semicolon. So here, that's all what we did. We did here that we have an interface and we give what the method that I want to do. Next, we can do the account exporter. Like I have a class that I want to create to export accounts. I can create here class and I will name it exporter, account exporter. Here, that this one I can have, for example, I can pass to it that I have private. I will create some properties. I want to be able to say what's the delimiter when I want to export, and if I want a header or not, and what are the list of accounts. So far, we didn't do anything new. We are creating a class, giving it some properties, private, it's just visible within the class. And then I create a constructor that I pass to it here what's the limiter, what's the include header, what is the account. So that's all what I did so far. If I want to use this, what you will be doing is that you can go here. Let's go to Developer Console. I will open it and let's refresh. And I will do here, execute anonymous, and I can create a list of accounts. Like I can either select them or I'm creating a list of accounts for now. So you can do that. And then I can create a, let's comment all of that. I can have here I created a class, an object from my class that we just defined, this one. And I said, like, what's the limiter? What's I want to include header or not? And what are the accounts? And I give it the accounts list that I created. So far, nothing is new, and we didn't do anything related to interface. So that's a class that we have. And I can have another one for the contact. Like I can create another one for the contact. I can have it named contact, sorry, contact exporter. And I can have the same idea here. I will take it, copy and paste. I will create 3 properties and what are the delimiters and everything. Again, all of that, we didn't do anything yet for the interface. Okay, I want to have an export method. Someone can come here and say, okay, public void export. And someone else can have created in the contact exporter. Instead of this method, they can have here a method that will take, for example, string, a file name, or a string delimiter, and so on. So, and maybe someone else will forget to add this export and the class will be useless. So that's where, for example, I can come and say, okay, I have an exportable interface, and it's important, like, to make sure if I will create an account or contact or lead exporter classes, that they implement the same. So you can have here, I will take the interface name. I say, I want to implement exportable. So if I try now to deploy, right click and deploy, this where the beauty of interface will come. I got an error. I'm not able to deploy. It will tell me why. Tell me that I must implement the method that is expecting export method from the exportable interface to be implemented. So it tells me, okay, yes, now you are saying you want to implement interface called exportable, and you want to follow the contract or the deal that this or this interface is enforcing. So it tells me, okay, you cannot go ahead with that. You are missing the method. So what we'll do, we'll create a method here called export. It will return a string and it doesn't take any parameters. And I will try to deploy. When I deploy, okay. Okay, sorry. This is in the contact. Let's put it into contact, or let me get the account one so I don't confuse you, because we didn't implement yet the interface in the contact. So I will do that. Here I decided that the export function for the account will show me the name, industry, and annual revenue. So I define it. Once I defined the export method, now I was able to save it and deploy it. let's say here I change this to void and try to save. I'm trying to change the return type. I decided I don't want this return type, or someone did it by mistake. Again, it will give you an error because it's expecting the contract to be followed and to return a string. And that's where it's nice because it enforces the classes that is implementing the same interface to follow the same pattern. The same if you try here to pass string test value, for example, here, and I try to save, so I'm changing the parameters, it will give me an error. Again, I'm not expecting the export, the interface is not expecting the export to take any parameters. So that's,
Sally,
yes.
can you display your exportable file side by side with your
Yeah,
classes that are
yes.
executed?
Good like that?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're wrong. Okay, so we have here the interface and we have here the export. So now, because the account is implementing this, I can deploy it and it shouldn't be, now it will give me an error. I didn't remove the parameter, but if I remove it, so now it's matching the return type and the parameters are empty. So I will deploy this. So the interface is forcing you to have certain method or certain format for the method. Once you say in a class that you are implementing this interface, you have to implement all the methods listed in the interface and to follow the same return type, same parameters, same name. So that's the benefit of it. If I go and say here implements, and I say here exportable, and I try to save, I didn't add the export, it will give me the error again. So now that is enforcing because I have this interface to have the method defined as well. So let me go get it for you. And the export method, like it's, for now, it's simple. It's just to return a string with the delimiter that you will pass just to show you the use case for it. So now we have contact and account exporter classes that are implementing the interface exportable. I will show you something that is good. So we saw here that I did that. I can say here system.debug account exporter.export. Okay. And I can have here, and let's see it in action. Okay. So it's saying, yeah, because here it's expecting only the limiter, true or false, to include the header and the list of accounts. Yeah. Bracket, it's a method, and let's see what we'll get. So I'm getting name, industry, annual, because I'm saying that I want a header. Then the two accounts I created, it's concatenated them and returned me the string that has all of that. So the method is working. The beauty of having this is something else as well. Let me show you. So here I had to create an account exporter and go through it. Let's say I have list of contacts too, and we covered that if someone wants to refresh their memory about it, we covered polymorphism, and what polymorphism means, like it has like different forms or different ways to be implementing the method. And we saw it when we were talking in object-oriented. So you can refresh what we covered there, but this is another way of implementing polymorphism. So we have here a list of contacts, and I will say here, I'll create an account exporter, and you will notice that the data type I used here is the interface data type, like exportable. I didn't use account exporter like I had here. And I created another one for the context, and the type here is exportable too. When I do the new, I created each of them, one as an account and one as a contact. Then I added them to a list of exportable just to show you how polymorphism works. And then we loop through exportable interface one by one that is in the list. And we called here exporter.export. So we have two items in the list, one for the account and one for the contact. But here I'm dealing with them as one type, which is exportable. But when I will call .export, each of them will call the implementation of the export that we have. The account will call the account export, and the contact will call the account export we have. So let's execute it together and we'll do the bug. You'll notice that here we have the account with the header for the account. Then for the contact, we were showing only first name, last name, email. So it's showing the contacts that we created in our testing, and it's doing the delimiter different than the account because that's what we defined when we created the constructor here. We use two different delimiters just to showcase. One of them we pass the account, the other one is the contact. So there is a question here. So what is exportable? Is it an object? It's an interface, but here I was able to refer to the account exporter and contact exporter as their interface exportable. So it hides the implementation from you. So if you have a method and you don't know it's coming to you, it's expecting an account exporter or contact exporter, but you know that you want to export, you can have a method that will expect exportable. And then you can call the export method as we have here, and that will call either the account or the contact export method based on the type. So instead of having to have two methods or two classes, one to expect account exporter and another one to expect contact exporter, you can have only one method that is expecting exportable. And because it doesn't care and it knows that regardless of the type, because the class is implementing export, we were able to call export and the right export was executed. And you will have, if you open here in polymorphism, so we have a video here explaining as well the polymorphism, and that's called polymorphism and object-oriented. And we implemented in a different way, but it's another example. So here it's another way of implementing polymorphism that you can refer to it with the interface. So that's the first example we wanted to do. Okay, we said we have to implement all the methods, right? What if I come and say, okay, I want to, instead having one method, I want something else. I want another method in the interface. I want all of them to have a method that will give me what's the file name. Because I have, for example, the CSV content and the data is converted into comma separated, but I still need the file name. So I want to have an extra method. So I can add to my interface this extra method that will return the file name. If I go to the account and say, try to deploy it again, or if you run compile from the interface, it will give you an error. So now it was working, but now like it giving me an error that I have to implement get export file name because I added a method here. So you have to be always mindful when you have an interface in your project and what's the impact, like how many classes, do they all need the same method? If the answer is yes, then yes, go ahead and add it to the interface and add the implementation for all the classes. If the answer is no, there is a subset of classes that may need this extra method and some no, then maybe it's another interface that needs to be created, separate one. And if the answer no, it's just one file needs this method, then you don't need to add it in the interface. You will add it to the class, and we'll see that together. Sorry.
Sally, one question regarding polymorphism.
Yeah.
So is there an advantage to do it that way, or is it just to be able to reuse code?
The advantage to it is mainly in bigger implementation where you're creating like a generic code. Like you're creating dynamic code and generic that you don't know what type you should be expecting. Like you want to deal in your code to them as exportable, but you don't know whether it's contact or account that is coming or lead or something else. So the benefit of it is that you have dynamic kind of implementation. You don't have to be specific. Like I don't have like here, I did it in developer console, but if I have to create this in a method, I will have a method that will expect a list of exportable. If I don't do it that way, then I will have a method to have a list, expect a list of account, and another list that expect a list of contact. And for example, this method is just print all. And I'm repeating the logic of print all in these two methods, and the difference is in one is expecting account and another one is expecting contact. But if I do one method that will expect a list of exportables, so I don't care if in the future, even if you add another type, lead exporter, you don't have to add a third method. So it's easier to handle such scenarios where you want your code to be easier to maintain with different types that will behave the same way, and you want it to be dynamic, and you know that all of them has export, all of them are implementing the same. So polymorphism is like you are treating them as something else that include them. Like I'm treating here this as exportable, but actually when I will go for the first item is account, so the export method that is called is the account export method that is in the account exportable. When I go to the second list, I will have a second item on the list. I will have the contact exporter, and it will call the export method for that one. Make sense?
Great. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's go back here. So I added a second method. Now this is failing, and the same will be for the account. So let me get the code for it. And it's just a simple method that will return the name of the file. And again, I made up this example to be able to show it to you. So it doesn't really serve a purpose here, but again, it's just a use case or an example to see it. So now I'm able to save because I added export file name, and you will notice that it's returning string and it's the same name. It's not taking any parameters. So I followed the same pattern that we have in the interface. I have to do the same for the account. And in that case as well, I will be adding another method. I should have added here one for the get export file name. So I will save it. Okay. Next, what if as I said, like you want to add or to enforce that they have a log method, and you want all the exporter to have a log method, but it doesn't fit with the logic or the idea to be included in the export, because export interface is related to logic or use cases for exporting text or getting the file that name to be used when we do the export. So in that case, I can create another interface, and it will be the same. For example, if the answer was no, I don't need it for all the classes, but like half of the classes. So if I add it to the same interface, like if I do here void log, for example, that means if I save that, I'm enforcing all the classes to have it that are implementing this interface. But sometimes the use case first, Okay, now I want it in all, but or let's assume I need it only in account, or I need it in all, but the logic or the type of methods that I will have, logging, it doesn't have anything to do with exporting. So it doesn't fit here. Or if the answer was, yeah, I need it for account and contact, but I don't need it for lead exporter. So then if I add it here, I will be enforcing even the lead exporter to implement it. So that means I don't have it here. Can a class implement more than one interface then? The answer is yes, and that's what we want to show together here. So let me go get the other interface that we'll be creating. We'll be creating an interface called loggable to log values or to have methods related to logging. So I will have here, and let me get the logic for it. Again, it's not a class, it's an interface. And here I will define two methods, one for the log and that expect a message, and another one, log error, that expect an exception. And that's to showcase that it doesn't have to be always no parameter. We can pass or define the parameters we want. So let's see how we can use it. So for example, for the contact exporter, I can implement the second interface. So I would say comma, and I would say the name of the second interface I want. And you can add more. So let's deploy it. Now it's complaining that account exporter needs to implement the method void loggable log and loggable.logError. So it's complaining that we don't have these two methods that are related to the loggable interface right now. So let's add them and we'll see it in action together, that this error will go away. And again, the implementation is very simple. I'm just adding the box statement one to use the message and using the property we have. Let's add a new property for what's the prefix I want to have. Like maybe I want to have a prefix before my message and one for the error to show what's the error and the get message. I wanted to show it that way for the account. And for the contact, you can either have the same or you can decide you have a different implementation. So again, at this stage, exportable only is the interface used for contact. You may decide that you don't need it. So in case like you have half of the classes need loggable, you go add the loggable interface as we did for the account and then implement the methods. If a class doesn't need it, you don't have to add. But here for the example, I'm just showing to you. I will have loggable, and because I have loggable, I have to add the two methods as well. And for example, here I can have a different structure for it with message, value, for example. And here error or contacts. So I can, the implementation won't be the same across the classes. So that's something as well can be different, like the implementation, because the interface is telling me what we should do, but each class is saying how to do it. So let's see what's the error. Okay, yeah, we forgot to add this new property, and maybe I don't need it for this one. I can say message value, and I don't need to add this logging prefix. So not needed in this class. I'm choosing my implementation. So I can save it here. So I chose that I don't need this prefix in the contact. And for the account, because we are passing this, we can add here that I want to add string, pass it in the constructor, this dot, and I'm passing the value. So now I have two classes implementing this. And we can have as well, like, we can add a try and catch and add it, or we can even have here the methods. We can have here, for example, log. I want to use the log method that we just created. And for example, here, when I'm adding the prefix in the constructor, I want to add a parameter to it. So you can choose what you want to do. And the same for the contact, you can have your logs added. So we can, for example, if you want to use the log method you have, I can say contacts exported, contacts exported, and the size for it to be different than the other one. And that means we are using the second, like the log message that we added to the contact. So that's how you can implement multiple by having comma separated. And once you have a second one or third one, that means you have multiple contracts, you have to define them. So for exportable, we had two methods, we added them. For loggable, now we have two methods, we added them too. Just to let you know as well, when you do that, you cannot anymore refer to it as exportable. Like when you do, for example, if I want to use exportable .get file name, let's see, and I want to use the log, for example, the method, it will give me an error right now that I cannot do that. Let me here test. Because exportable doesn't see the log. The log method, you'll see here, it says like void log from the type exportable. Like exportable is not having the log method because the log is not part of the exportable interface. It's part of the loggable. So what you can do, let's try it together. I can do a typecasting. So I can do here, loggable. And I'll say, okay, I want to treat now the exporter as loggable. And I can do like that. Now this will work. Like I can log the message. Here we have one different message for the account because we code the one for the account, one for the contact. So you have to be mindful when you do the polymorphism, and in the video of the polymorphism, you'll see it. If you are using as exportable, only the methods that are available for exportable will be available for you. If you try to use something from the second interface, whether you do this, like to typecast it like temporary as this loggable, or you can choose then at this stage, like, okay, I want to treat it as account exporter, like instead of loggable, I can do here account exporter. If it's an account, for example, let's not do that because it will fail for the contact, because the contact is not an account. I could do like that. I can do here. I can work with it directly. Like if you don't do exportable, like I could define them as account exporter directly and deal with it. So account exporter dot here, we want to export, and account exporter object here, so we don't confuse anyone, and dot log, and I get here exportable dot get finding. So I can treat it directly as the type, or if you need methods differently in another interface, you can typecast it at the moment, at the time. So that's what you can do as well. Here we didn't do system.debug. You see it? So I'm just giving you different ways to deal with it. again, don't feel overwhelmed or feel confused too much. If I'm just showing to you that you can refer to it as the parent, or like not the parent, as one of the interfaces. But if your class implement more than one interface, it will give you an error when you try to deal with different methods in another interface, because the exportable doesn't see the log, for example. So whether like at this stage you decide temporary to typecast it as the other interface to access the different methods, or you can decide altogether, I will treat it as a count exporter instead of typecasting loggable and exportable. And what limits your options will be the implementation you are doing. If you are looking for something generic and you don't want to have a different method, different parameter types, one for account exporter, one for contact exporter, then you will have to do something like that. If you want to use specific, you will have that way. And the benefit of having interface in that case, that we are enforcing a structure or a specific method with their specific parameters to be called. Okay, so the next thing that I want you to think about, like we saw together, like we wanted to add or simulate a case where we wanted to add logs methods. So you said like, okay, yes, I want to have it in all classes, but because it didn't fit the same functionality, we decided to have another interface. And we said like, if for any reason we have set of classes that needed versus sets of classes that don't need it, then as well, by separating them, we didn't break all the classes that are using export. The other question that sometimes we will be asked, like, do I have always to create then interfaces? Like, does my classes always have to have methods only from interfaces? The answer is no. So for example, I may decide that I want to have a method that does this for me. Like I want a method not in any interface that will get me, I pass what's the industry and it will get me all the accounts in this industry. Or instead of using like this, like query, I may be looping through the accounts. Sorry, I'm in the contact. So let's go here. For example, I want to do that. And the best use case for that was not to do a new so-call. Maybe I would be querying through those, for example. Let's say instead of doing this, I do for account object in list of accounts. And I would say if, for example, account object dot industry equal, and I would say equal the industry value that's coming. You can ignore the capital and small, but here, let's say I want to have it. And it's the filter accounts, new list of account. So I want to have a method where it will filter the accounts that I have to return for me the ones that match the industry that I'm interested in. And I have the list and I may call it multiple times, one for each industry I'm interested in. So in that case here, I can do something like that. And here, this one, and I will return this method, for example, this list. Do I need to have an interface for this? Like, is it something that will be repeated across different classes? The answer is no. Does it, do I want to enforce all the contacts and account and lead and other classes to implement it? The answer is no. This is very specific for this one, for example. So I will add it here. The same, maybe you have another one that is very specific and you want to add it to the contact. I want to have a method, for example, to tell me which contacts are missing their emails from the list of contacts that I have. So I will create a method that returns for me a list of contacts that are missing their emails, and I return them. I'm using the log method. So that's a very specific method that I don't need to have it in my interface because I don't want to enforce it everywhere, and it's very specific for my use case that I'm working on now. So that's just to show you different things. Like we saw together how to implement an interface and how the contract will be enforced, how to implement multiple interfaces. And we saw as well polymorphism and the impact of multiple interfaces on it too, and what's the workaround for it. And the final thing is that you don't have to keep adding and adding different interfaces. You may have to decide that this method needs to be added to the specific class, and that's it. So your class can have multiple interfaces with their methods to implement them, plus extra methods and properties that are very specific to your current class. So that's the last thing that I wanted to show you in the demo, because some people sometimes think that we have to stick to the class, to the methods in the interface, and that's. So that's, we'll cover the demo or multiple demos that I wanted to show. And we want to summarize what we learned today together and remind you why we went through this, because it seems a bit out of context because we were working on asynchronous Apex and we are not in object-oriented sessions, but it makes so much sense to me, at least, to have it for you now before starting the next series of the asynchronous. So we learned together how to define an interface and that it has only method signature, no logic, not how, what you need to implement, but not how to implement. We saw together how the classes, when they implement an interface, how they are committed to implement the contract or the methods in that contract. We saw that we don't have this anybody to the methods in the interface, no logic. The interface and logic will be in the classes that implement it. We saw together how a class can implement multiple interfaces. We saw that sometimes on top of the methods that the interface is enforcing, you would be creating your custom method with your custom properties. You are not just limited to what the interface is asking you to implement. You can have your own logic as well. We saw how interfaces support polymorphism and how we can use different classes the same way by referring to the one of the interfaces without referring to the specific class name. And I showed to you like the video you can refer to in the beginner series to see another way of implementing polymorphism in a simpler example. The reason why we did it is because Salesforce, we said like there is Salesforce interfaces that we didn't build ourselves. All of that we were seeing example how to build our custom interface, but like there is Queueable, Batchable, Schedulable. So like there is HTTP callout, mock, like there is the other interfaces we saw in the screenshots at the beginning of the session that will be useful when we talk about Apex Queueable and batch classes and Schedulable. And the HTTP callout mock we saw it last session. So it's important now to understand why we had implement and what's the impact of that implement. That means we are agreeing to implement a specific interface that Salesforce is enforcing us to use, for example, when we are working with Apex Queueable, and that is a contract, we have to implement all its methods as well. Best practices, we saw together we were using upper camel case. So like the classes, start with a capital letter at the beginning. As we always do with the classes, if you have a different, like 2 words, you will start the second word with a capital letter as well. We prefer descriptive names like exportable, loggable in form of like kind of adjective, if possible. Like sometimes you won't have that, or it's hard to find one that makes sense. So you can choose whatever name you can. From where I'm coming from in the past, like We used to use I as a prefix, I payment, I export, I log. When I searched, like, it's not the common Apex style that people use, so maybe avoid using it. I love it. It tells me that I'm dealing with an interface more clear, but when I searched like what the people preference in the word of Apex, I found like people not liking using the I prefix. I saw some people are suggesting to use an interface keyword at the end, like export interface, log interface. Again, it's a preference. I feel it will make it longer. It's too much like to add in the name. Some people prefer it, some people not. It's not required to use this format or to always avoid the I or not to use the interface. I'm just like based on the research I did and what people are saying in different logs and different forms, that's what I found people are talking about. But it's a discussion that you can have within your team and your team lead to see what's the naming convention that they want to use. Salesforce, like you'll find that will have schedulable, queueable, comparable. So they don't do IQ or iSchedule or schedule interface. So it makes sense as well to kind of follow the same pattern if possible. What's next? Like we finished mainly the topic for today. Now that we understand implements, we know what interface means, we'll see the different types of asynchronous. Yes, Queueable is an interface. We'll be using it with Apex, Queueable Apex as the second type of asynchronous Apex that we'll learn about. Batchable or Schedulable will be other interfaces, and we'll see the exact name when we go to the implementation. And for the batch classes, the Schedulable Apex. So that was the time to see like first what is interface and implement means, but those are the ones that kind of will touch base upon them like in the coming sessions to finish the topic we started, which is asynchronous Apex. And just to remind anyone who didn't attend the previous sessions for asynchronous Apex lets you run a piece of code in a separate transaction whenever there is resources without blocking the sequence of your code or the user. And that will give you a new set of limits. And in some cases, you have higher limits than synchronous Apex. If you missed the future method or Apex invocation, you'll find them in the intermediate sessions. I will encourage you to go through it. We have here the future method, part 1 and part 2. Go through it again because next time we'll be talking about Queueable Apex together, and that's the next type that we'll discover together in asynchronous Apex. So thank you so much for being here with me in the session, and I'm happy to have anyone new to the session today. I hope to see you next time, and I will see you in person, like live in the session in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. And if you have any question from here to the next session, reach out on LinkedIn or Slack, and I will make sure to get back to you as soon as I can.